right, so I was on David Paradin's Safety Doc podcast the other day, and we talked a lot about books and the state of books, and the surprising fact, this was just me spitballing it, but he was talking about how empathy amongst college students took a sharp drop in the year 2000. And I just wildly guessed that maybe the reason was that people stopped reading novels, because I'm a novelist, and when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, by chance, science and research say that I accidentally hit the nail on the head, and that has actually been proven to be linked somewhat to the drop in empathy. So we talked a lot about books on the podcast, and it reminded me of a point that I've been trying to make on my regular podcast, the Savage Hippie podcast, which you can find on David Cole's YouTube channel. I've been trying to make this point for probably 6 months, but we never work our way around to it, because even though I'm a novelist and I'm on a podcast, I rarely get to speak about literature or novels on the podcast. And this is kind of going to be the central point of this video, because even when you're engaged in culture and you're working with people who are engaged in culture, everything today now revolves around politics. It's well nigh impossible to promote a book or a painting, well, actually especially painting, considering the politics of art galleries, but a book, a painting, a comic, what have you, without choosing a political team, getting engaged with that team, and getting into the social network that is built around that team, because these two polarities of left and right are kind of what we've built our current culture around. Excuse me. Maybe I should have changed my clothes before I started, but it seems like it's just about impossible for people to promote cultural products without attaching it to the larger social framework of Team Red and Team Blue. Which brings me to a question that I've had this answer for months, and I haven't been able to bring it up on the podcast because conversation never comes around that way, because we're usually talking about politics or once in a while horror movies, which is what my two other co-podcasters are interested in, and I'm just outnumbered. Which is kind of my motivation for making more videos myself, because there are things that you just can't work into another conversation. And also, another thing you have to do to get your books read is to be on these dumb shit media such as YouTube. Back in 2008, I started a blog, and I called it Fine, I'll Start a Goddamn Blog, and I'm thinking I should have called this YouTube channel Fine, I'll Start a Goddamn YouTube Channel. Because there are so many other cultural forms that are ascendant over the novel, that if you want to be a novelist, you have to do 10 other things so that people will know that you're alive, because no one will try to read a novel by an unknown person. And a lot of that is understandable, because so many of the novels out there are garbage, for reasons that I sort of went over in the Safety Doc podcast, but I'll probably wind up touching on them again. But to get to the actual question, before I beat around that bush again, the question is, why are so many novelists, or why do so many novelists pretend to be, or talk themselves into being, hard leftists? The hard part is the more interesting part of the question. The natural position of a novelist is not a political ideology. It's an exploration of human nature, and yes, an exploration of human politics, but human politics looked at from a sort of intellectual, fictional point of view are too complex for anyone to stand in the middle of a sign waving a placard saying, kill the whatevers. And I've tried to write for leftist outlets, and I've tried to write for rightist, if that's a word, outlets, and I continually find myself unable to stand in the middle of the crowd and scream, because if you've trained yourself as a novelist, there's a lot more going on in the world than our team and their team. But that's the way the culture works now. And so people have to pick one or the other. And I think a lot of people pick left simply because that's where most of the cultural capital and money is. And you don't want to, the market for readers is shrinking and shrinking in large part because of part of that used to be inherent in the sort of like rich kids circles that old school publishing circulated around. And that wound up alienating a lot of readers because they publish their friends, they publish their kids' friends, they publish people of their own social class, and the chances that the best novelists all come from the same social circle are pretty much zero. So they were publishing a lot of garbage that alienated a lot of readers. So that lost a lot of novel readers. And then Amazon becoming a place where you could self-publish, and publishing opening up to a lot more people, unfortunately coincided with the culture becoming so politically fractured that far too many novels are written from a polemical left-wing or right-wing point of view, which, you know, it impresses all your friends and it impresses your fellow ideologists, but a lot of readers, even if they agree with you, don't want to read a novel that's a propaganda piece. They want to read something more complex, and if your novel is just a propaganda piece, they could just read a political blog that's not only a propaganda piece, but it gives them actual facts or made-up facts. Ask Tim Pool about that. But something like facts for their own political arguments, like you're not, if you're writing a novel that's polemical, you're not using the ammunition that the form actually gives you, and so you're losing out readers to political blogs. So the novel has been leaking readers the whole time, and the audience that is left is largely leftist. I mean, there are pockets that are more right-wing. There are the sad puppies, obviously, and instead of being a breath of fresh air, they're equally polemical. I don't think Fox Days Company has ever published anyone who wasn't a Christian. So being a mirror image of something that's bad isn't good. So like the left part is more self-explanatory. Culture is politicized. You have to pick a team, and that's the bigger team amongst novel readers. So most people just go where the largest audience is. Or those are their beliefs, or that's what they think their beliefs are. I think most people just think what their friends think, but that's just the misanthrope in me speaking. But the real question is, why are people so hard left? You know, you used to have your Kurt Vonnegut, who was probably a liberal, maybe a classical liberal, and his writing came from a point of view that was politically informed, but it wasn't extremist or espousing a party line. In fact, it was anti-party line. So why are people, you know, a lot of writers are proud to say they're communists. And it occurred to me while I was recording the Savage Hippie podcast, which I would say is kind of center-right, or center-right libertarian, classical liberal sort of thing, which means of course, hard leftists probably think that our views are extreme, but in all honesty, the things that we talk about on that show are mostly, well, unless it's Edwin, but mostly dependent on the facts about what we're talking about and the specificities of the situation that we're discussing. And to discuss that with any assurance you need to be very well informed about the specifics of the situation at hand. And if you're as a novelist, the reason I'm on a political show like this is because most shows are political. And if you want to work with other people, they're going to want to talk about politics. But as a novelist, as someone who has to pay the rent, you're already doing those two things. You're paying attention to literature and writing, you're doing your own writing, or you're doing everything that you need to do to pay the rent. And then for these creative ventures that you do with other people, you need to be politically informed in order to contribute and have an opinion. And sometimes on the show, I just have to punt because I've been translating 19th century French literature all week, and I really don't know why President Trump's underwear is at the top of the flagpole on the White House lawn. No idea. And I just have to, swallow my pride and say, well, you guys spent your week talking about this or reading about this. I spent my week in another century, so I'm just going to, sit by the sidelines. And that's not always the most pleasant thing for people to do. And I realized that if I had a very extreme, hardline political view, and probably being on the left would be the easiest way to do this because that's the majority in cultural circles, I wouldn't really need to know the specifics of the situation that I was talking about. Trump's underwear is at the top of the flagpole. I wouldn't need to know how it got there. I wouldn't need to know who put it there. I wouldn't need to know why. All I would have to know is that my audience hates Trump, and I can just say something about how much I hate him and how this proves what an idiot and an incompetent Nazi boob he is. And then everyone's like, whoop, 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 whoop. I don't need to know anything about the situation. I don't need to do any research. And I can go back to writing my novel about how men are oppressing me without having spent any time at all doing show prep for the political stuff that I need to do to get people to know who I am so that they will actually purchase my book. Maybe I should develop a really extreme political view.
You're so unfair to the left. Why are you picking on communists? Clearly you're a Nazi.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of well-known novelists on the right, but there are a lot of people who write books on the right who sell a lot of copies. And part of the phenomenon of the political sickness that exists in the books market is something that a lot of people complain about as they feed into it, particularly as regards what are called tradthots, very attractive young women like Lauren Southern who espouse a conservative point of view. And I'm not really that familiar with her work, but I've heard a lot of guys saying that she and writers like her don't really have that much to offer. They're just pretty and right-wing girls, so they get a lot of extra attention just based on that. I mean, Lauren Southern did write a 90-page book that tons of people bought, and she made a lot of money, and it seems very insubstantial. Guys, if you want that to stop happening with tradthots, stop rewarding people just for being on your team. Stop rewarding people just for espousing a point of view that you agree with. Guess what? Lots of people agree with you. Lots of people agree with your basic point of view. It's not a life-saving soul saver to finally hear another voice in the darkness saying exactly what I think because I read Anthem. There are a lot of young men out there who are rewarded through social media and through YouTube and whatnot for agreeing with each other. And then if you add to that a pretty face that people want to stare at, if you add to that the retardedly interactive nature of culture now, Like, everyone expects culture creators to interact with their audience. It's part of the job. So when they're watching a really pretty girl's video, there's this false hope that if you watch it and interact with her, you might get to know her. So that feeds into that too. And you all are all rewarding people for simply agreeing with you, whether they have anything new to say, whether they have anything to contribute or not. And this is what happens. If you don't want tradthots to get the money and audience that you think you deserve, stop paying attention to people just for agreeing with you. And stop, this goes for the left and the right, probably the left double, triple. Stop ostracizing people for not agreeing with exactly what you say, or what you say you think, or what you think you believe. Culture needs to be decoupled from politics because it's extremely unhealthy. It's making people more extremist than they would be. It's making them dehumanize people that they disagree with. It's even making them dehumanize people they agree with. Like Lauren Southern tradthot. Alas, I don't know how to do that. The advice that I gave on the Safety Doc show was the only advice that still comes to mind. Read an actual book once in a while. Read a book by someone you disagree with. If you're a woman, read a book by Kingsley Amis. If you're a man, try a book by Jane Austen. Get to know the inside of other people's heads and stop rewarding people simply for agreeing with you. It's, as someone who wants, people ask me what my actual political opinions are, and I guess center-right libertarian, classical liberal, but most of all, fuck your politics. I want to make novels, and I don't want to have to wave a flag and a placard and stand in a fucking street demonstration making a fool of myself just to have an audience. It's disgusting. I guess I just don't trust people's intelligence enough anymore to do anything. The people who seem to do the best in the cultural sphere are the people who unabashedly and cleverly manipulate the way that human nature works and the way that the internet works, which is admirably clever in a way, but it's not the point of literature. It's not the point of art. It's not the point of doing anything that is meant to be meaningful. But it seems to be the only way to get through to an audience. I've been listening to Tim Pool a lot, who I have a lot more sympathy for him lately since the algorithms have changed and have screwed up his channel a bit. Tim Pool is sort of a millennial journalist who got a job with Vice and then decided to strike out on his own, and I'm kind of looking at him now going, oh wow, yeah, it would be terrible to be about 30 and suddenly have the whole playing field change and wipe out the entire career and skills that you had worked all through your 20s to build. That would be terrible. As a member of Gen X who worked in the press and was earning my way up through newspapers and media and, hoping to get a connection with a publishing house before all the publishing houses died, I have no idea what that's like, Tim. But he's been putting out, since he's been knocked out of his complacency and his comfort zone, he's been putting out a lot of really good videos about the way lies do well in the new media, and the way it's terrifying how well lies do and how impossible they are to eradicate from the public consciousness once they've been put out there. And as he says, some people do it by accident, but some people are deliberately inserting lies because they know it'll work and they know it'll be effective for their political point of view. And a lot of people are doing the same thing in the literary sphere. They're doing things that are, yes, effective, at least for them in the short term. But they're also continuing to alienate what's left of the reader base, because you buy this book because it belongs to your political team, but in the end, it's just this lightweight throwaway, feel good for 10 minutes or 5 minutes artifact that doesn't really move you, and deep down you would really rather be watching Netflix, even from a, not just from a dumb entertainment point of view, but even from a, am I going to get something substantial to take away from this point of view? Which is fine. I mean, maybe movies and TV are now the dominant art form, but since you need a shit ton of money to make a movie or a television series, that's hardly the up with the people democratic sort of thing that the left supposedly was. I'm sorry, for a minute there I thought it was 1985 and the left still gave a flying fuck about poor people. Right. Anyway, that is why I think so many novelists are hard left, and it's both a cause and a symptom of the ongoing crash through the basement of the literary arts. What we do about that is, I suppose, up to individual people. I suppose we could all just read old books, or we could try to go on writing honestly and trying to figure out who the writers who write honestly are, and try to reward them by, I don't know, you could kill off 95% of the population, the stupidest 95% of the population, and get rid of the internet, and I'd make the most absolutely transparent evil dictator, I really would.